Rio de Janeiro, or simply Rio, is the second most populous municipality in Brazil and the sixth most populous in the Americas. The metropolis is anchored to the Rio de Janeiro metropolitan area, the second most populous metropolitan area in Brazil and sixth most populous in the Americas. Rio de Janeiro is the capital of the state of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil's third most populous state. Part of the city has been designated as a World Heritage Site, named Rio de Janeiro, Carioca Landscapes between the mountain and the sea, by UNESCO on 1 July 2012 as a cultural landscape. Founded in 1565 by the Portuguese, the city was initially the seat of the Captaincy of Rio de Janeiro, a domain of the Portuguese Empire. Later, in 1763, it became the capital of the state of Brazil, a state of the Portuguese Empire. In 1808, when the Portuguese royal court transferred itself from Portugal to Brazil, Rio de Janeiro became the chosen seat of the court of Queen Maria I of Portugal, who subsequently, in 1815, under the leadership of her son, the Prince Regent, and future King João VI of Portugal, raised Brazil to the dignity of a kingdom within the United Kingdom of Portugal, Brazil, and Algarves. Rio stayed the capital of the pluricontinental Lusitanian monarchy until 1822, when the War of Brazilian Independence began. This is one of the few instances in history that the capital of a colonizing country officially shifted to a city in one of its colonies. Rio de Janeiro subsequently served as the capital of the independent monarchy, the Empire of Brazil, until 1889, and then the capital of a Republican Brazil until 1960, when the capital was transferred to Brasilia. Rio de Janeiro has the second largest municipal GDP in the country, and 30th largest in the world in 2008, estimated at about 343 billion reals. It is headquarters to Brazilian oil, mining, and telecommunications companies, including two of the country's major corporations, Petrobras and Vale, and Latin America's largest telemedia conglomerate, Grupo Globo, the home of many universities and institutes. It is the second largest center of research and development in Brazil, accounting for 17% of national scientific output according to 2005 data. Rio de Janeiro is one of the most visited cities in the Southern Hemisphere and is known for its natural settings, carnival, samba, bossa nova, and balneario beaches such as Barra da Tijuca, Copacabana, Ipanema, and Leblon. In addition to the beaches, some of the most famous landmarks include the giant statue of Christ the Redeemer atop Corcovado Mountain, named one of the new 7 wonders of the world, Sugarloaf Mountain with its cable car, the Sambadromo, a permanent grandstand lined Parade Avenue which is used during Carnival, and Maracana Stadium, one of the world's largest football stadiums. Rio de Janeiro is the host of the 2016 Summer Olympics and the 2016 Summer Paralympics, the first time a South American and a Portuguese-speaking country will host these events, and the third time the Olympics will be held in a Southern Hemisphere city. The Maracana Stadium held the finals of the 1950 and 2014 FIFA World Cups, the 2013 FIFA Confederations Cup, and the 15th Pan American Games. History. Europeans first encountered Guanabara Bay on 1 January 1502, by a Portuguese expedition under explorer Gaspar de Lemos, captain of a ship, and Pedro Alvarez Cabral's fleet, or under Goncalo Coelho. Allegedly, the Florentine explorer Amerigo Vespucci participated as observer at the invitation of King Manuel I in the same expedition. The region of Rio was inhabited by the Tupi, Puri, Botoculo and Maxicali peoples. In 1555, one of the islands of Guanabara Bay, now called Villa Gagnon Island, was occupied by 500 French colonists under the French Admiral Nicolas Durand de Villegagnon. Consequently, Villegagnon built Fort Coligny on the island when attempting to establish the France Antarctic colony. The city of Rio de Janeiro proper was founded by the Portuguese on 1 March 1565 and was named São Sebastião de Rio de Janeiro, in honor of Saint Sebastian the Saint, who was the namesake and patron of the then Portuguese monarch D. Sebastião. Rio de Janeiro was the name of Guanabara Bay. Until early in the 18th century, the city was threatened or invaded by several, mostly French, pirates and buccaneers, such as Jean-François Duclerc and René du Guay-Troan. In the late 17th century, still during the sugar era, the Bandeirantes found gold and diamonds in the neighboring captaincy of Minas Gerais. Thus Rio de Janeiro became a much more practical port for exporting wealth than Salvador Bahia, which is much farther to the northeast. On the 27th of January 1763, the colonial administration in Portuguese America was moved from Salvador to Rio de Janeiro. The city remained primarily a colonial capital until 1808, when the Portuguese royal family and most of the associated Lisbon nobles, fleeing from Napoleon's invasion of Portugal, moved to Rio de Janeiro. The kingdom's capital was transferred to the city, which thus became the only European capital outside of Europe, as there was no physical space or urban structure to accommodate hundreds of noblemen who arrived suddenly. Many inhabitants were simply evicted from their homes. There was a large influx of African slaves to Rio de Janeiro. In 1819, there were 145,000 slaves in the captaincy. In 1840, the number of slaves reached 220,000 people. When Prince Pedro proclaimed the independence of Brazil in 1822, he decided to keep Rio de Janeiro as the capital of his new empire. Rio continued as the capital of Brazil after 1889, when the monarchy was replaced by a republic. Until the early years of the 20th century, the city was largely limited to the neighborhood now known as the historic city center, on the mouth of Guanabara Bay. The city's center of gravity began to shift south and west to the so-called Zona Sul in the early part of the 20th century, when the first tunnel was built under the mountains between Botafogo and the neighborhood that is now known as Copacabana. Expansion of the city to the north and south was facilitated by the consolidation and electrification of Rio's streetcar transit system after 1905. Botafogo's natural beauty, combined with the fame of the Copacabana Palace Hotel, the luxury hotel of the Americas in the 1930s, helped Rio to gain the reputation it still holds today as a beach party town. Plans for moving the nation's capital city to the territorial center had been occasionally discussed, and when Juscelino Kubitschek was elected president in 1955, it was partially on the strength of promises to build a new capital. Though many thought that it was just campaign rhetoric, Kubitschek managed to have Brasilia built at great cost. By 1960, on the 21st of April that year, the capital of Brazil was officially moved from Rio de Janeiro to Brasilia. Between 1960 and 1975, Rio was a city-state under the name Guanabara State. However, for administrative and political reasons, a presidential decree known as the Fusion removed the city's federative status and merged it with the state of Rio de Janeiro. The territory surrounding the city, whose capital was Niterói, in 1975. Even today, some Cariocas advocate the return of municipal autonomy. The city hosted the 2007 Pan American Games and the 2014 FIFA World Cup final. On the 2nd of October 2009, the International Olympic Committee announced that Rio de Janeiro would host the 2016 Olympic Games and the 2016 Paralympic Games, beating the finalist competitors Chicago, Tokyo, and Madrid. The city became the first South American city to host the event and the second Latin American city to host the Games. The city hosted the World Youth Day in 2013, the second World Youth Day in South America and first in Brazil. Geography. Rio de Janeiro is on the far western part of a strip of Brazil's Atlantic coast close to the Tropic of Capricorn, where the shoreline is oriented east-west, facing largely south. The city was founded on an inlet of this stretch of the coast, Guanabara Bay, and its entrance is marked by a point of land called Sugarloaf, a calling card of the city. The center, the core of Rio, lies on the plains of the western shore of Guanabara Bay. The greater portion of the city, commonly referred to as the North Zone, extends to the northwest on plains composed of marine and continental sediments and on hills and several rocky mountains. The south zone of the city, reaching the beaches fringing the open sea, is cut off from the center and from the north zone by coastal mountains. These mountains and hills are offshoots of the Serra da Mar to the northwest, the ancient gneiss granite mountain chain that forms the southern slopes of the Brazilian highlands. The large west zone, long cut off by the mountainous terrain, had been made more easily accessible by those on the south zone by new roads and tunnels by the end of the 20th century. The population of the city of Rio de Janeiro, occupying an area of 1,182.3 square kilometers, is about 6 million. The population of the greater metropolitan area is estimated at 11 to 13.5 million. It was Brazil's capital until 1960, when Brasilia took its place. Residents of the city are known as Cariocas. The official song of Rio is Cidade Maravilhosa by composer André Filho. Climate. Rio has a tropical savanna climate that closely borders a tropical monsoon climate according to the Köppen climate classification, and is often characterized by long periods of heavy rain from December to March. In inland areas of the city, temperatures above 40 degrees Celsius are common during the summer, though rarely for long periods, while maximum temperatures above 27 degrees Celsius can occur on a monthly basis. Along the coast, the breeze blowing onshore and offshore moderates the temperature. Because of its geographic situation, the city is often reached, especially during autumn and winter, by cold fronts advancing from Antarctica, causing frequent weather changes. It is mostly in summer that strong showers provoke catastrophic floods and landslides. The mountainous areas register greater rainfall since they constitute a barrier to the humid wind that comes from the Atlantic. The city reputedly has had rare frosts in the past, but this has never been decisively confirmed. Some areas within Rio de Janeiro state occasionally have falls of snow grains and ice pellets. These phenomena are definitely not rare or limited to a few regions, having already happened in the metropolitan area several times in the 21st century. In other areas there is true snowfall more than once in each century, most commonly around the highest mountain in the state and fifth highest in the country, Pico das Águilas Negras, in the cities of Resende and Iteixeira. Elsewhere in the state, drought is very rare, albeit bound to happen. happen occasionally given its strongly seasonal tropical climate. The Brazilian drought of 2014-2015, most severe in the southeast region and the worst in decades, affected the entire metropolitan region's water supply. Plans to divert the Paraíba do Sul to the Sistema Cantareira during its water crisis of 2014, in order to help the critically drought-stricken Greater São Paulo area, offered the easiest short-term response to the consequences of climate change in the deforestation of the Amazon rainforest, an issue expected to linger across the entire country in the near future. This will likely make the situation even more complex, however, as sufficient rainfall to supply tap water service to both metropolitan areas in the future is merely speculative. This circumstance, as shown in a recent central government report, is worsened by the fact that 37% of the country's tap water is being lost because of leaky pipes, fraud and illegal access, and by the country's use of hydroelectric power as its main energy source, roughly in the same suburbs that correspond to the location of the March 2012, February to March 2013 and January 2015 pseudo-hail falls. There was a tornado-like phenomenon in January 2011, for the first time in the region's recorded history, causing structural damage and long-lasting blackouts, but no fatalities. The World Meteorological Organization has advised that Brazil, especially its southeastern region, must be prepared for increasingly severe weather occurrences in the near future, since events such as the catastrophic January 2011 Rio de Janeiro floods and mudslides are not an isolated phenomenon. This was not an isolated event. The events in Brazil confirms a global trend that storms tend to be increasingly strong and in places where it did not take place with the same force, said Rupak Marcolli, WMO expert on climatological phenomena. In early May 2013, winds registering above 90 km/h caused blackouts in 15 neighborhoods of the city and 3 surrounding municipalities, and killed 1 person. Rio saw similarly high winds in January 2015. The average annual minimum temperature is 21 degrees Celsius. The average annual maximum temperature is 27 degrees Celsius, and the average annual temperature is 24 degrees Celsius. The average yearly precipitation is 1,069 millimeters. Temperature also varies according to elevation, distance from the coast, and type of vegetation or land use. Winter, cold fronts and dawn, morning sea breezes bring mild temperatures. Cold fronts, the intertropical convergence zone, the strongest seaborne winds and summer evapotranspiration bring showers or storms. Thus the monsoon-like climate has dry, mild winters and springs, and very wet and warm summers and autumns. As a result, temperatures over 40 degrees Celsius that may happen about year-round but are much more common during the summer, often mean the actual temperature feeling is over 50 degrees Celsius when there is little wind and the relative humidity percentage is high. In such weather, avoiding dehydration, overexercising and direct exposure to the sun is recommended, especially for children and elders. Rio de Janeiro is second only to Cuiabá as the hottest Brazilian state capital outside northern and northeastern Brazil. Temperatures below 14 degrees Celsius occur yearly, while those lower than 11 degrees Celsius happen less often. The phrase "phase of frio" usually refers to temperatures going below 21 degrees Celsius, which is possible year-round and is commonplace in mid to late autumn, winter and early spring nights. There is also a slightly greater seasonal difference in the incidence of solar radiation people receive in Rio de Janeiro in comparison to places in the northern hemisphere with similar climate and the same exact latitude, as the Earth most closely approaches Sol only 12 days after the Southern Hemisphere's summer solstice. See illustration at the article on the Earth seasons. Between 1961 and 1990, at the INMET conventional station in the neighborhood of Sword, the lowest temperature recorded was 10.1 degrees Celsius in October 1977, and the highest temperature recorded was 39 degrees Celsius in December 1963. The highest accumulated rainfall in 24 hours was 167.4 mm in January 1962. However, the absolute minimum temperature ever recorded at the INMET Jacarepagua station, 3.8 degrees Celsius in July 1974, while the absolute maximum was 43.2 degrees Celsius the 26th of December 2012, in the neighborhood of the Santa Cruz station, while the highest accumulated rainfall in 24 hours, of 186.2 mm was recorded at the Santa Teresa station in April 1967. The lowest temperature ever registered in the 21st century was 8.1 degrees Celsius in Villa Militar, July 2011. Average annual temperature of the sea is 23 to 24 degrees Celsius from 22 degrees Celsius in the period July to October to 26 degrees Celsius in February and March. The dominant ocean current is the warm Brazil current. The wettest and driest months tend to be December and August respectively.